Here's a question for every pony. What are the elements of harmony? Now, that question might seem a bit out of left field, considering that it's been, 3 years since those things were first introduced? Or maybe you think it's completely appropriately timed because of magical mystery cure. Well, whatever the case, my question isn't so much about the purpose of the elements, as it is about the true lore behind them. So let's start at the beginning. The end. In its current state, the elements are the physical manifestations of 6 virtues that together can be used to dispel anything that causes disharmony, right? Well, close but no cigar. The previous description implies that all 6 elements are equal in strength and purpose, when it's been made clear on numerous occasions that in reality there's a balance of 5-1. You know which one. This has been portrayed both through visual representations and lore. The 5 elements of kindness, generosity, laughter, loyalty, and honesty are all presented differently than the final element, magic, in the sense that the 5 might be debatable but are generally clear in what they represent. The element of magic, however, is not. Now, let's take a step back for a bit and look at what the elements were many years prior to today. The elements were little more than 6 tools used to, again, get rid of disharmonious stuff. They were divided between Celestia and Luna. Now, the exact division of the elements for the purpose of this theory is not very important, so long as they each held an equal amount of elements and Luna held the element of magic. Stay with me, I'm gonna explain this later. The first time the elements were used to our knowledge was against Discord. Later, they may or may not have been used again against Sombra. And finally, they were used against Nightmare Moon. Back in the present, we're shown over the course of the series that the 5 elements that are not magic gradually spill their virtues into the solo element, eventually completing the element and earning the bearer of said element the cosmic right to evolve to the highest tier of physical and supernatural being in the established universe. So, we can draw at least one conclusion from that, right? Clearly, magic is the most important element of the 6. Well, no. The 5 other elements are actually the real keys to the equation. You see, the show tells us that harmony is represented by a special type of magic, and this magic is represented by friendship. In actuality, friendship is just a facet, just one of the many things that can symbolically stand for this conception of harmony. For example, the same could be said about, let's say, storgy. Okay, right there I sense I might have caused a little confusion. Allow me to explain. Storgy is one of the 4 ancient Greek words used to describe a form of love. In this case, love for a family member. The other 3 are eros, romantic or sexual love, agape, the self-emptying of one's own will and becoming entirely receptive of God's divine will, and philia, which, besides being a neat little pun, also means, you guessed it, friendship. So, with that out of the way, storgy is something that, like philia, like friendship, requires kindness, generosity, laughter, loyalty, and honesty to be fully realized, and like friendship, can create harmony. At this point, you're probably starting to wonder what any of this has to do with what I said before, that the 5 non-magic elements are the real keys to the elements of harmony. Well, all in due time. For now, consider this. Celestia and Luna used to wield the elements of harmony, but did they do so as friends or as family? Did they wield them using philia or storgy as their base? Well, considering that we never get any hint of the royal sisters considering each other a friend, I'm inclined to believe that their combined element wielding was based around not friendship, but kinship. Something that seems worth noting at this point is that in the show, the element of magic is never directly referred to as the element of friendship. This is just Twilight's subjective interpretation of what the element represents. Considering what I said before about kinship, it would make more sense that the element of magic represented love, the whole thing, rather than only friendship. The elements by their nature change and adapt depending on how they're needed, how they're used, and who uses them. In ye olden days, when they belonged to both Luna and Celestia, the elements were oversized, simply shaped, neatly cut, non-set, multicolored gemstones. For whatever reason, at some point in time after Discord and Nightmare Moon were sealed, the elements turned to stone orbs with various engraved shapes on them, and one of them went missing. The final shape the elements took when the main cast inherited them is the shape of set gemstones in golden accessories. Now, let's take a little break from this dry abstractionism for a while and let's tickle the imagination for a bit. And roll with me on this one. I promise, it'll pay off. Celestia and Luna used to wield the elements of harmony, 6 different oversized magical gemstones. They used the elements to beat Discord together, after which one of the original 6 elements vanished, this element being the weakest of the 6 at the moment, magic. which at this point in time represented kinship or storji. The reason this element was the weakest was connected to the reason for Luna becoming Nightmare Moon. Luna felt like her night went unappreciated. She felt like it was overshadowed by Celestia's day. She felt betrayed by her own sister and envied her. This damaged their relationship and weakened Luna's bond with the element of magic. Eventually she lost it, and this in turn severed her relationship with Celestia even more, because now the elements had become unusable, being an incomplete set. With Celestia holding Luna responsible for the loss of the elements, and Luna's already existing jealousy of her sister growing, the siblings grew distant enough to the point that there was nothing holding Luna back from becoming Nightmare Moon. With that, the two remaining elements Luna held lost their hostess. Celestia adopted these elements, and with a new wielder and balance found, the elements changed from gemstones to gemstone orbs, and a new element of magic was formed. But this time, not one of storji. This element of magic represented agape, a love for God, as this at the time seemed like the most appropriate form of love to create an element from. This, however, came with one big inherent problem. Celestia, at this point, is this universe's closest equivalent to an honorable god, essentially twisting the nature of this element to narcissism. Now, narcissism, despite being a form of love in itself, fundamentally conflicts with how the elements of harmony operate. Narcissism put the element of magic in an enclosed environment. The elements work by having multiple users feeding positive aspects into each other. But the other elements could not provide anything that wasn't inherently in this element of magic already. This element was set at one level of strength, and it could neither grow nor fall in power for the lack of having any outside sources to interact with. Celestia intended to use the 5 reformed elements and the newly created element of magic to purify Luna, but she came to the realization that the synergy between the elements was flawed. Now realizing the true nature of the elements and not wanting to risk any accidents when redeeming Luna, Celestia decided to instead seal her in the moon, so at a later point in time she could once again draw out the true powers of the elements of harmony in order to purify her sister. Over time, the elements started to reject each other, and the 5 base elements turned to stone. The element of magic, being independent from the others, retains its form. Celestia, now completely unable to use the elements, disposes of the incompatible second element of magic, and hides the 5 base elements in a location where she can easily find them when needed. Many years later, Twilight Sparkle and the gang find the 5 base elements, and even though her book describes that 6 elements were used to stop Nightmare Moon, she has no idea what the final element is, where to get it, or even why it's not together with the others. All this was set up intentionally. The 6th element used to stop Nightmare Moon was a defect. It didn't work in a way Element of Harmony should. The vagueness regarding it was put into place as a safeguard, to prevent it from being grouped together with the base elements again. As Twilight starts to abandon the hope of ever defeating Nightmare Moon, her friends approach, slowly getting closer to and reinvigorating their respective future elements. The base elements react to the bonds between the 6 and project a vision into the most appropriate wielder for the next element of magic. As a result, Twilight gains enough understanding to realize that the only possible way for her to wield the element of magic is with philia, friendship. With this realization from Twilight and the new hosts present, the elements evolve to their current state. And now that all the conditions are set, a new element of magic is made. An element of magic utilizing the love of philia. So there you go. That's the story of the elements. It only leaves one question though. What happened to those other 2 supposed elements of magic? Well, let's start with the element of agape. That element was defect in the way that it could not be used together with the base elements of harmony. But by no means was it powerless. Like I said before, it was a standalone element, one that constantly radiates a powerful magical aura. It wouldn't be that hard to believe that at some point in time, a unicorn may have found it and, I don't know, maybe had it crafted into a powerful but corrupting magic charm? Then there's the element of storji, the original element of magic. Well, ever stop to wonder how it disappeared in the first place? I mean, I myself said why it disappeared, but how did it disappear? Well, let me start off by saying that yes, we have seen the original element of magic in present-day Equestria. That element was lost somewhere between the sealing of Discord and the sealing of Nightmare Moon. It was lost at the time that Luna and Celestia were together, but their bond was growing weak. Now imagine, if you will, that there was a unicorn who knew of the power of the elements and wanted that power for himself. However, he was only interested in getting a hold of the element with the weakest bond of the 6, as that one in itself seemed plenty powerful for his needs, and it also seemed like the easiest one to acquire. Before being sealed away for a long time, he actually managed to get a hold of it, causing the element to be sealed along with him. For 1,000 years. Yes, indeed, The crystal heart, the gemstone powered by massive amounts of nationalism, which out of the four forms of love is fairly comparable with Zhoovy, is the original element of magic. What's that? Looks completely different from the other elements? Oh, is that really the case? This was one of the original elements of harmony, and remember what they looked like back then? They were, and I quote myself, oversized, simply shaped, neatly cut, non-set, multicolored gemstones. If you ask me, the crystal heart fits that description just fine. So yeah, that's the gist of it. Going back to the question we started with, what are the elements of harmony? The elements are 5 ever-changing physical manifestations of virtues that together can create a physical form of love. These 6 items together can be used to rid the world of disharmony. It's close to the initial assessment, but ever so slightly different. Now, as a final statement before closing this information dump, I've mentioned that love has 4 forms, but so far only 3 came into play. The only one we haven't been presented with so far is Eros. Ironically, this is the form that Miss Love, but wow, that nickname has more meaning in retrospect. And Shining Armor, the current holders of the Crystal Heart, seem to represent. Whatever the case, I'm inclined to believe that at some point in the future, the elements will transform once more, this time thriving off the love of romance. Anywho, I'm Zinzo, expanding my headcanon and saying, I love you. Oh, and by the way, sweets, spice, I do not sound cute.